minute. We'll start in 1 minute. Thank you. Merci. As we begin our meeting today, and on behalf of Ottawa City Council, I wish to acknowledge that Ottawa is built on unceded Anishinaabe-Algonquin territory. The peoples of the Anishinaabe-Algonquin Nation have lived on this territory for millennia. Their culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. The City of Ottawa honors the peoples and land of the Anishinaabe-Algonquin Nation and honors all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples and their valuable past and present contributions to this land. Just before we get started, I wanted to mention, as you know, it is Black History Month, and Councillor King asked me to point out that there is a display of some archival photos, some very powerful photos outside Jean Piaget Hall. I also wanted to mention that, as you all know, this Saturday marks the 2-year anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And Ottawa has welcomed a number of families from Ukraine to our city since the war began. And we will be hearing a performance in a few minutes of the Canadian and Ukrainian national anthems from this beautiful choir of children from Ukraine. And we're so delighted to welcome you here and to welcome their proud parents and family members as well. We want you to know how much we support you and the people of Ukraine and how welcome you are in our community. So thank you for being here today, and thank you for what you have brought to our community. So with that, for those who are able, please rise for a moment of personal reflection. Thank you. Merci. Please remain standing, and I'll ask Councillor Plante, Conseiller Plante, to introduce our guests.
Salut tout le monde. On February 24th, the world will commemorate the 2nd anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. At City Hall, the blue and yellow flag of Ukraine has flown for 2 years as a symbol of solidarity with the people of Ottawa and this council and the courageous Ukrainian people. May this year bring victory to Ukraine, and may it bring peace to all children across the world. We are joined today by the Ottawa Ukrainian Children's Choir, who will sing the anthem. The choir was founded in 2023 as a non-profit organization led by newly arrived Ukrainian professional musicians and volunteers, many of whom are sitting out in the crowd. Many of the children of the choir are newcomers to Canada. The choir also gladly welcomes Canadian children who would like to join their artistic endeavor. I am very glad to welcome the Ukrainian Children's Choir to City Hall, as well as Louis Sabourin, Councillor for Limbourg in Gatineau. Дякую, що і прийшли до нас. Вітаємо і міській раді Отаві. Слава Україні!
Thank you again to our wonderful choir this morning. And thank you to their families and the leaders of this choir. I'll just give everybody a moment to take their seats. Okay, I will now ask the Deputy Clerk to do the roll call, please.
Councillor Luloff.
Bonjour.
Councillor Dudas.
Present.
Councillor Hill.
Present.
Councillor Curry. Here. Councillor Kelly.
Present.
Councillor Gower.
Here.
Councillor Kavanagh.
Present.
Councillor Johnson. Councillor Devine.
Here.
Councillor Bradley. Here. Councillor Tierney.
Present.
Councillor Plante.
Ici.
Councillor King.
Here.
Councillor Troster. Here. Councillor Leeper.
Good morning.
Councillor Brockington.
Here.
Councillor Menard.
Here.
Councillor Carr. Councillor Kitts.
Here.
Councillor Derouz. Councillor Brown.
Here.
Councillor DeRoche.
Here.
Councillor Hubley. Here. Councillor Lowe.
Here.
Mayor Sutcliffe.
Here.
Le quorum est atteint, Monsieur le Maire.
Merci beaucoup. Confirmation of minutes from the council meeting of February 7th. Is that carried? Declarations of interest. Councillor Desroches.
Thank you, Mayor. I, Councillor Steve Desroches, declare a potential deemed indirect pecuniary interest on matters related to item 16 in-camera items 16.11 Hydro Ottawa Holding Inc., Hydro Ottawa Holding Inc. corporate restructuring on the agenda for meeting number 31 of the Ottawa City Council on Wednesday, February 21, 2024, as my spouse is an employee of Hydro Ottawa. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Desroches. Any other declarations of interest? Okay, I'll note the communications that are on the agenda. We did have Councillor Johnson advise us that she would be absent from the meeting today. Motion to introduce reports. Councillor Hill.
Mr. Mayor, that the Hydro Ottawa Holding Inc. Report entitled Hydro Ottawa Holding Incorporate Corporate Restructuring in Camera, Built Heritage Committee Report 11, Emergency Preparedness and Protective Services Committee Report 9, Finance and Corporate Services Committee Report 11, Planning and Housing Committee Report 22, Transit Commission Report 10, and the reports from the City Clerk entitled Status Update, Council Inquiries and Motions for the period ending February 16, 2024, and Summary of Oral and Written Public Submissions for items subject to the Planning Act explanation requirements at the City Council meeting of February 7, 2024 be received and considered.
Is that carried? Item 10 is from the City Clerk, the status update on council inquiries and motions for the period ending February 16th. Is that received? Received. Item 11, the Built Heritage Committee Report, 11.1 Bill 23, Implementation of Changes to the Ontario Heritage Act. Is that carried? Item 11.2, I know there's a motion related to this one. Do people want this held, or do we want to deal with it quickly now? Does anyone want it held? Okay, then if Councillor Troster, you'd like to introduce your motion.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a long one, sorry. Whereas this report recommends approval of an application for new construction at 235 Mariposa Avenue, the previous High Commission official residence for the Republic of Uganda, a property designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act as part of the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Conservation District. And whereas a previous application related to this property was approved by City Council in 2020 for alterations and additions to this building that was on site, the building was recently demolished without the appropriate approvals in place. And whereas this application was submitted as the owner wishes to continue with construction using the previously approved design, And whereas a previous application presented at Built Heritage Committee in January spoke to a building located further back from the street than the adjacent Grade 1 property, which aims to reduce the visual impact of the additional height from the streetscape, and whereas the new application proposes greater massing and footprint than the previous home at 235 Mariposa, and whereas this new proposal creates an opportunity to review the current setbacks and allow to set the home further back from the street for a reduction in impact to the cultural heritage landscape, therefore be it resolved the report, recommendation 1, be amended to read as follows. 1, approve the application for new construction at 235 Mariposa Avenue according to plans by Bell and Associates Architecture, dated November 23, 2023, and received on December 4, 2023, conditional upon A, the applicant citing the house so that it is set further back from Mariposa Avenue, at least as far as the deepest part of the south elevation of 216 Manor Avenue, in order to further reduce the visual impact of the new building as viewed from Mariposa Avenue, including seeking any necessary planning approvals, and should any required planning approvals be granted, delegate authority to staff for final approval of the increased front yard setback under the OHA. And should any required planning approvals not be granted, the application will be deemed approved as per the attached plans, subject to the remaining conditions outlined in this report. The exterior cladding materials being full depth, natural, clay brick, and wood siding, and the applicant providing all exterior cladding materials for approval by heritage staff. Prior to the issuance of any building permits, the approved material shall be indicated on the building permit plans. C, prior to the issuance of the building permit, 1, the applicant and their general contractor meeting with Heritage and Building Code staff to review the approved plans, details of the approval, and agreeing to provide a copy of the approved Heritage permit to all subcontractors, including posting a copy on site. 2, the applicant submitting a construction schedule to the satisfaction of staff and Heritage Planning and Building Code services, which shall include inspections by staff at predetermined milestones. I will just very quickly explain. You may have heard the news story. The Ugandan embassy, their ambassador's residence was essentially demolition by neglect. It was allowed to rot for many, many years. And then they originally had a plan to renovate it in its existing footprint, and they demolished it without permission. So Heritage Committee maintains that this is a new build now. It is no longer a renovation, and that they should have to conform to the current heritage guidelines and not be grandfathered into the old ones. So I was very happy to put this forward, but Councillor King can speak in more detail about this file. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor King, did you want to speak to this?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. As committee chair, I'm pleased to second and support Councillor Troster's technical amendment as it reflects both residents' concerns as well as those of the majority of the Built Heritage Committee to ensure that any new construction at 235 Mariposa Avenue abides with the criteria and characteristics of the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Conservation District. Based upon community concerns for the need for stringent conditions surrounding setbacks to better comply with Heritage Conservation District expectations, the committee approved a technical amendment at its last meeting with the understanding that even more enhanced requirements to ensure compliance by the property owner would be brought to council for its consideration today. The previous application presented at Built Heritage Committee in January before the unlawful demolition of the building located on this site spoke to a building located further back from the street than the adjacent Grade 1 property, which aimed to reduce the visual impact of the additional height from the streetscape. The new proposal creates an opportunity to review the current setbacks and allow to set the home further back from the street for a reduction in impact to the cultural heritage landscape. This technical amendment therefore works to ensure that the applicant sites the house so that it is set further back from Mariposa Avenue, at least as far as the deepest part of the south elevation of 216 Manor Avenue, in order to further reduce the visual impact of the new proposed building as viewed from Mariposa Avenue. This motion also ensures that the exterior cladding materials properly blend into the neighborhood, ensuring the materiality be of full depth, natural clay brick, and wood siding. The conditions will reaffirm the need for the applicant to provide all exterior cladding materials for approval by Heritage staff prior to the issuance of any building permits. This motion also creates a condition to ensure that the applicant submits a construction schedule to the satisfaction of Heritage Planning and Building Code Services staff to ensure that inspections are conducted by staff at predetermined milestones. This motion ensures that strict and stringent conditions are placed upon an applicant who has been unprepared to cooperatively work with the committee and, most importantly, the community. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor King. Councillor Brockington?
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning to you and colleagues. My questions are for staff. First of all, I support the motion that's on the floor now and the main motion coming out of Built Heritage. My question, though, is what recourse does the city have should this new residence be built and does not adhere to the more strict conditions that are being placed on it? If they haven't played ball to date and the residence is constructed and there are matters that were not adhered to and they're strictly spelled out, what's the city's recourse in that regard?
Thanks, Mayor. Yes, as the motion denotes, Councillor, there are multiple inspections that are a matter of course are undertaken already in our normal processes, but there is an enhanced level of inspections, a construction schedule that's being asked for through the motion as well. So there will be a level of enhanced oversight certainly on this project.
Okay, so what happens if the structure is built or in the process of being built and it deviates from some of the conditions that are spelled out here?
Through the Building Code Act and the Ontario Heritage Act, there would be the ability for both the chief building official and our own processes through the Heritage Act for enforcement to be undertaken.
And are there any conditions when a residence for an ambassador or a high commission are exempt from any conditions that we may impose on them?
Mayor, I think I'll ask my colleague in legal services to enhance my response, but certainly these properties do cause an additional level of challenges if they do have a diplomatic status. So we work through our colleagues at Global Affairs Canada to assist us in any enforcement and any overall communications with the property owner.
Mayor, just to supplement that, I understand the parcel itself is not subject to any kind of diplomatic exemption at the time. It is an issue of an assertion of diplomatic immunity that would, the assumption generally speaking is that all parties, foreign governments and ever are bound by local law unless there is an assertion of diplomatic immunity. I'm not aware that any such immunity has been asserted at this point. But as Mr. Curry indicated, that is something that we would have to deal with, presumably also through Global Affairs in the event that there was such an assertion sometime in the future.
Fair enough. Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Okay, thank you. So on the motion by Councillor Choster, is that carried? And on the item as amended then, is that carried? With one dissent, thank you. Item 12, Emergency Preparedness and Protective Services Committee report. Item 12.1 is the Rural Firefighters Employee Status, and I'll just take a moment to recognize the firefighters who are in attendance today. Thank you and welcome. Thank you for all you do for our community. Great to have you here. Is that item carried? Item 12.2 is the Enhanced False Fire Alarm Strategy. Is that carried? 12.3 is the status update on towing and storage regulations and provincial regime. Is that carried? Item 13, Finance and Corporate Services Committee. Item 13.1 is the Community Partners Insurance Program. I understand there's a motion related to that, so we'll hold that. 13.2 is the Information Technology Services 2024 Work Plan Update. Is that received? Item 14 is Transit Commission. 14.1 capital adjustments for the Transit Commission. Is that carried? And the bulk consent agenda, is that carried? Okay, so going back to item 13.1, the Community Partners Insurance Program. I understand, Councillor Kavanagh, you have a motion related to this?
Yeah, it's a substitution for recommendation 6 to be read as that in the event that staff are unable to procure the insurance necessary to support the program, city staff prepare a report to Finance and Corporate Services Committee discussing the means by which the city can continue to support neighborhood-based community events and activities organized by community groups.
Okay, did you want to speak to that, Councillor
Yeah.
Kavanaugh?
Yeah, this is just to an extra insurance, if you want to call it that, to make sure that there's no gaps in case there is an issue with insurance, that the city report to Finance and Corporate Services on what this, what to explain what they're doing to help and continue to support neighborhood-based community events, which we all hope to see continue. So we just do not want to see any gaps. Based on the previous motion, recommendation, there was that possibility. So this is to report back.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hubley?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to ask staff about this. It's obvious you've put a lot of work into this. All of council's received a lot of communication from Mr. White explaining what the process was, what the challenges were, and how you came up with this. And so thank you for that work. I'm assuming you already had a plan for if you couldn't find coverage. And so I'm just wondering if this motion is needed, or do you already have a good plan, or should you not be able to find the insurance coverage that we're looking for?
Councillor, I think I would start by noting that this is actually the proposal that you see before you is actually devised by motion by Councillor Kitts. With respect to the provision that the proposed motion would seek to amend, my understanding is that is included essentially as that fail-safe mechanism, appreciating that the time between when we might find out that we are unable to procure insurance and the renewal date, essentially the date of the expiry of the existing term, tends to be quite short. That's just the nature of the insurance industry. And so that was included to ensure that there would be at least continuity of support, that if it couldn't be provided through insurance, that essentially a funding program through which the participating groups could source funding to procure their own insurance would be maintained, and staff would have the flexibility to set that up quickly. And so that forms part of the councillor's motion. Again, part of the challenge in all of this is that there are very limited options other than, for example, the provision of funding. The city cannot act as an insurer at law.
So I'm trying to get a little clarity here for this motion. So you're saying this is a helpful motion then, that you're recommending we support it? Or it's something you're already doing? That's what I'm wondering. And my apologies to Councillor Kitts for not acknowledging her work at the start. My question was going to you, not to her, and so that's why I did that. But
Understood. I think what I would suggest, Councillor, is that the addition of further steps before staff would be in a position to implement a fail-safe mechanism exposes those groups to that risk that there will be a period where they will be without insurance or without support in some fashion. So I think that the motion as passed at committee was designed to ensure that continuity of support. This would presumably, appreciating the committee's meeting schedule, council's meeting schedule, the requirement for further consultation, would add an additional step that might put that level of support, in my view, at risk.
okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hubley. Councillor Kitts?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I did reach out to FCA representatives directly. I did receive the suggested wording from Mr. Cullen yesterday. I am trying to understand what options would be left if we could not find an insurer, because I think we've heard repeatedly now from staff that we would have very few options. So maybe that's a question for the mover. What options do you see us consulting on should we not be able to find an insurer?
Well, I think that the issue here is to report back to Finance and Corporate Services to discuss this and make sure that there's no gaps so that we can continue to support neighborhood-based community events. The worst case scenario is that we let these events not happen because we say, oh, well, we can't afford it. We need to have some kind of mechanism so that they can be supported.
Okay, thank you. I think respectfully, I disagree. I think that the wording I included in the original motion, which is really a last resort option if we cannot find a provider, was included to protect the program and ensure that that funding that's allocated to it remains available for community association insurance. And I think what we just heard from Mr. White is that we would effectively be creating a gap if we then have to go back to consult, and that actually we would leave community associations with a period where they could be uninsured. So I won't be supporting the motion, but thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Kitts. Councillor Leeper?
Thank you very much. And I think I'll just ask the same question I asked at committee when the FCA raised its concerns about the motion as it's before us today. So to staff, the motion as worded by Councillor Kitts would give you pre-authorization to make a funding source available without having to come back to council to provide that backup in the instance that we're not able to find an insurance company willing to provide the CPRIP insurance, right?
That's correct. And certainly staff, I think it's fair to say that would be certainly a protective measure or even an interim measure. And it would certainly be open for a council of the day or a committee of the day, once that interim measure was in place, to direct staff to, again, revisit the options to procure insurance at that point. So again, I think it is, as the council attorney, kind of measure of last resort, fail safe, but it's not necessarily committing the program to that format for the indefinite future.
Thank you. You've anticipated my second question, which is whether or not in the event that we are unable to find insurance, we have an ability without having to have a lot more process to start funding parties to go potentially find their own. But in the meantime, nothing precludes this council from directing staff to look at alternatives, correct?
Correct.
So again, colleagues, I think the motion by Councillor Kavanagh would create a gap. I don't think either we or the FCA are known for their nimbleness. I think there could be a substantial period of time between when insurance lapses potentially at the last minute and we find an alternative for the program, during which at least the staff authorization that they would have through this motion to make a funding source available without further process is good protection for communities while we explore what the alternatives could be. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Leeper. Councillor Carr.
Thanks, Chair. I think Councillor Leeper covered what I wanted to cover. I don't like to just tell anecdotes, but I will note that as a previous community association president, up until the time that I was elected, that in the last couple of years of the program, we would get a couple days notice that the program was being extended by 30 days until you found an insurer or whatever else. So there are literally, when you're a community association president responsible for insurance, there are literally days before you're waiting to find out if your program is renewed or not. And that's my concern, that if we go back to committee, that we will lose that opportunity. So at times I remember taking an email saying it would be back to my community associations. We didn't even have the certificates in time because the timelines have been so tight. So I'm concerned about the gap as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Councillor Devine.
Thank you, Chair. Just to follow up on the comments and the direction that Councillors Leeper and Carr were going in, certainly I will be supporting the Kitts motion, but I appreciate the intention behind the Kavanagh motion, which is to see what might happen should the city and or organizations be in a situation where they cannot procure insurance, because I'm going to assume that if and when the city cannot procure insurance and therefore puts money back into the fund, community associations themselves may find themselves in a difficult position where they also cannot procure insurance. And so my question then, also having been a former community association president, where sometimes we had an insurance policy and others benefited from it, if and when we are in a situation where we cannot procure insurance, and there may be the exposure of a gap where community associations may be exposed, does the city, within its own insurance policies, have the power to make those exposed community associations as additional insured parties within the umbrella of our own insurance? Can we extend interim protection in that way while they seek other insurance?
Councillor, that's something we might have to look at some point. Where the city has done that in the past, it is generally through the vehicle of some contractual service agreement that it has in place, and it provides an indemnity, in essence, through that agreement. As I say, what the city can't do is the city cannot act as an insurer for outside parties. And so we would have to, I think, in that eventuality, we'd have to see as to what the options were.
Thank you. And just so I understand, if and when we're in a situation where the city might make an organization an additional insured party, that's not the same thing as acting as an insurer for that organization, correct?
Yes, Mayor. The difference is, generally speaking, an additional insured party, those arrangements are done through some kind of contractual arrangement whereby the city has some measure of interest, direct interest, legal interest in whatever that party may be doing.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Devine. Okay, so for the reasons that Councillor Kitts outlined, I will not be supporting the motion, and I feel that what was approved at committee is sufficient, but let's go to a recorded vote then on the Kavanaugh motion, please.
Councillor DeRusse? Councillor DeRusse? No, thank you. Councillor Plante?
Oui.
Councillor Menard?
Yes.
Councillor Brown?
No.
Councillor Carr?
No.
Councillor Kelly?
No.
Councillor Devine?
No.
Councillor Gower?
No.
Councillor Bradley?
Yes.
Councillor DeRoche?
No.
Sir Brockington?
No.
Councillor Kitts?
No.
Councillor King?
No.
Councillor Tierney?
No.
Councillor Troster? No. Councillor Leeper?
No.
Councillor Curry?
No.
Councillor Lowe?
No.
Councillor Hill?
No.
Councillor Hubely?
No.
Councillor Johnson? Councillor Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Councillor Luloff?
No.
Councillor Dudas?
No.
Mayor Sutcliffe?
No.
4 yeas, 20 nays.
Okay, thank you. And then on the original recommendation from committee, is that carried? Okay, thank you. So we're now going to move in camera to consider a few items. I will ask Councillor Hill now to introduce the motion to resolve in camera, which is seconded by Councillor Brockington. Councillor Hill.
Il est résolu que le conseil municipal se réunisse à huis clos, conformément à la lignée 13.
Be it resolved that City Council resolves in camera pursuant to procedure by Law 2022-410 on the security of the property of the city to receive a briefing from the Emergency and Protective Services on a corporate security and protective measures, and be it further resolved that the rules of procedure be suspended to add to the agenda the item and related information report entitled entitled Corporate Restructuring pursuant to subsection 13.1 of the Procedure Bylaw 2022-410, a trade secret or scientific, technical, commercial, financial, or labor relations information supplied in confidence to the municipality or local board, which, if disclosed, could reasonably be expected to prejudice significantly the competitive position or interfere significantly to the contractual or other negotiations of a person, a group of persons or organizations, and be it further resolves that the procedure bylaw be suspended to add on the agenda the item and related information report entitled Bilingualism Policy Exception, Chief Information Security and Digital Risk Officer, and be it further resolves that the City Council remain in camera to receive the information report regarding the exception to the bilingualism policy pursuant to subsection 13(1)(b) of the Procedure Bylaw 2022-410, personal matter about an identifiable individual, including staff, and 13(1)(d), labor relations or employee negotiations.
Par conséquent, il est résolu que le conseil municipal lève la séance et se réunisse en séance publique.
Be it further resolved that, no, that,
Yeah, that part's later.
yeah, that,
OK. Conseillère Plante est très fière. Merci, conseiller.
Councillor Plant is quite proud. So.
Approximately will start again in 1 minute. Thank you. Let's start again. For the benefit of those who are rejoining us, Ottawa City Council just met in camera pursuant to the procedure bylaw number 2022-410 as follows, subsection 13(1)A, the security of the property of the city, to receive a briefing from the Emergency and Protective Services on corporate security and protective measures. Subsection 13(1)B, personnel matter about an identifiable individual, including staff. And 13(1)D, labor relations or employee negotiations, to receive the information report regarding the exception to the bilingualism policy for the Chief Information Security and Digital Risk Officer. Subsection 13(1)I, a trade secret or scientific, technical, commercial, financial, or labor relations information in order to consider the in-camera report from Hydro Ottawa Holding Inc. entitled Corporate Restructuring. During the closed session, no votes were taken other than procedural motions and/or directions to staff. We have two motions arising from the in-camera discussion, beginning with a motion from Councillor Leeper.
Thank you. So this is with respect to the bilingualism policy exception, whereas the City of Ottawa has the duty to maintain, improve, and account for all critical assets, including organizational data, information, and information systems, and whereas the pace and sophistication of cyber attacks continues to grow and the city's accelerated digital initiatives and migration to the cloud have highlighted the need for the city to continue to mature its security governance and strategies, and whereas the position of Chief Information Security and Digital Risk Officer has been vacant since February 23rd, 2023, and whereas the City of Ottawa's bilingualism policy section R6311 requires that all external candidates considered for level 1 to 3 management positions be bilingual, and any exceptions after having undertaken a comprehensive recruitment effort shall require council approval, and whereas interim general manager and chief financial officer FCSD in consultation with the city solicitor and interim city clerk have deemed that the selection process for the said position constitutes a comprehensive recruitment effort in compliance with the bilingualism policy, and whereas the selected candidate does not meet the language requirements and has agreed to enroll in language training, therefore, be it resolved the council approve an exception pursuant to section R6311 of the bilingualism policy for the candidate selected for the position of Chief Information Security and Digital Risk Officer on the understanding that they will enroll in French language training to progress in this area, and that their proficiency be assessed as part of their ongoing performance reviews. Be it further resolved that City Council direct the interim general manager and Chief Financial Officer FCSD to inform council by way of memo when the hiring process has been finalized.
Thank you, Councillor Leeper. Is the motion carried?
Sent.
Okay, and then Councillor Curry has a motion arising from the Hydro report. Councillor Curry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Whereas Hydro Ottawa Holding Inc., HOHI, is incorporated under the Ontario Business Corporations Act, OBCA, and pursuant to the OBCA, the Board of Directors of HOHI has requested a special meeting of the sole shareholder being the City of Ottawa. Whereas in response to Hydro Ottawa's growth and business diversification, the Board of Directors of HOHI recommends approval of a corporate restructuring to create two wholly owned entities under HOHI for the purpose of reducing borrowing costs, increasing financial capacity, and supporting future growth. Whereas the shareholder declaration for HOHI requires shareholder approval for this corporate restructuring, therefore be it resolved that Council, as sole shareholder of HOHI, number one, approves the recommendation of the Board of Directors of Hydro Ottawa Holding Inc., as outlined in the report, to create two wholly owned entities under HOHI, including Holding Company A, to be named, and having one or more subsidiaries being Energy Ottawa Inc., Portage Power, etc., and a second holding company B to be named, having the remaining subsidiary companies, Hydro Ottawa Limited, and Vari Holding Inc., etc. Number two, authorize the mayor and city clerk to approve amendments to the constating documents of HOHE on behalf of the shareholder to give effect to this restructuring. And 3, authorize the President and Chief Executive Officer of Hydro Ottawa Holding Inc., HOHE, to determine the representatives from HOHE or one of its wholly owned affiliates to be appointed to the initial board of directors of the newly created corporations.
Okay, thank you. Is the motion carried?
Carried.
Item 17 on the agenda is motion to adopt reports. Councillor Hill.
Mr. Mayor, that the Hydro Ottawa Holding Incorporated report entitled Hydro Ottawa Holding Incorporated Corporate Restructuring in Camera, the Finance and Corporate Services Department report entitled Bilingualism Policy Exception Chief Information Security and Digital Risk Officer in Camera, Built Heritage Committee Report 11, Emergency Preparedness and Protective Services Committee Report 9, Finance and Corporate Services Committee Report 11, Planning and Housing Committee Report 22, Transit Commission Report 10, and the reports from the City Clerk entitled Status Update, Council Inquiries, and Motions for the period ending February 16th, 2024, and Summary of Oral and Written Public Submissions for items subject to the Planning Act explanation requirements at the City Council meeting of February 7th, 2024, be received and adopted as amended.
Is that carried? Okay, motions of which notice has already been given. A motion from Conseillère Plante on Patro programming. Conseillère Plante, did you want to speak to that? Okay. If you could just read the be it resolved portion, that would be great.
Par conséquent, il est résolu que la Ville d'Ottawa prenne toutes les mesures nécessaires pour assurer la
Resolved that the City of Ottawa will make sure that the program continues through a third-party supplier. Be it resolved that the renewable funding to the Patro to support community programs be provided to the General Director of Recreation, Culture and Installation under delegated powers so that the city can provide similar programs to the Patro.
Motions requiring suspension of the rules of procedure. We have a motion to appoint members to the Ditch Alteration and Maintenance Council Sponsors Group on suspension of the rules. Is that carried?
Carried.
Okay, Councillor DeRuse, the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Whereas in 2022, Council approved the Ditch Alteration Policy Update Report, AC 2022 PIE Jan 0001, and approved the creation of a Ditch Alteration and Maintenance Sponsors Group to act as a sounding board and to work with staff to oversee the implementation of ditch alteration policy, including a public consultation and education plan. And whereas on February 7, 2024, Council approved Motion 2024-3007 to reestablish the Ditch Alteration and Maintenance Sponsor Group for the 2022-2026 term of Council to be comprised of up to 6 members of Council. And whereas the Office of the City Clerk has undertaken a circulation for expression of interest, and 9 members of Council have expressed an interest in serving as members at large on this sponsors group, whereas the composition of the sponsors group seeks to have a geographic representation while avoiding quorum of any committee of Council. Therefore, be resolved that Council appoint the following members of Council to the Ditch Alteration and Maintenance Sponsor Group. Now, 1 is Councillor Teresa Kavanagh, 2 Councillor Catherine Kitt, 3 Councillor Tim Turney, 4 Councillor Riley Brockington, 5 Councillor Lane Johnson, and finally Councillor Dave Brown. Be further resolved that the sponsor group meetings also include the participation of 7 or more city staff, including the General Manager of the Public Work, Infrastructure and Water Services and Planning, Real Estate and Economy Development Department, and or their designated. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor DeRuse. Is that carried? Notices of motion for consideration at a subsequent meeting. There are a few. Councillor Troster.
Thank you. I have 2, so I'm not sure which one you want me to read first.
The first one I
Women's
have
Day.
is the
Okay,
International
great.
Women's Day. Yeah.
All right, whereas in 1910, women delegates from around the world met in Copenhagen to propose that Women's Day become an international event to promote equal rights for women. And whereas the first International Women's Day was held in 1911 with the support of over 1 million people. And whereas in 1977, the General Assembly of the United Nations officially called for all countries to mark a day for the recognition of women's economic, political, and social achievements. And whereas municipalities can play a profound role in promoting and advancing gender equity. And whereas local and international activists, organizations, and affected communities have shown us more work is required to achieve gender equity. And whereas every year thousands of events are held around the world to inspire, celebrate, and honor women, therefore be it resolved that Ottawa City Council declare March 8, 2024 to be International Women's Day in the City of Ottawa.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to do the other one now too?
Sure. This one is seconded by Mayor Sutcliffe, and I will come and speak with many of you about this before we discuss it at council. Whereas all Ontarians deserve and expect a safe and respectful workplace, and whereas municipal governments as the democratic institutions most directly engaged with Ontarians need respectful discourse. And whereas several incidents in recent years of disrespectful behavior and workplace harassment have occurred amongst members of municipal councils, and whereas these incidents seriously and negatively affect people involved and lower public perceptions of local governments, and whereas municipal codes of conduct are helpful tools to set expectations of council member behavior. And whereas municipal governments do not have the necessary tools to adequately enforce compliance with the municipal codes of conduct. Therefore, be it resolved that Ottawa City Council supports the call of the Association of Municipalities of Ontario for the Government of Ontario to introduce legislation to strengthen municipal codes of conduct and compliance with them in consultation with municipal governments, and be it further resolved that legislation consider encompassing the Association of Municipalities of Ontario's recommendations for updating municipal codes of conduct to account for workplace safety and harassment, creating a flexible administrative penalty regime adapted to the local economic and financial circumstances of municipalities in Ontario, increasing training of municipal integrity commissioners to enhance consistency of investigations and recommendations across the province, allowing municipalities to apply to a member of the judiciary to remove a sitting member if recommended through the report of a municipal integrity commission. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Troster. Councillor Menard.
Thank you very much, Mayor. This is around the Clean Water Act Source Protection Committee, whereas the Clean Water Act Source Protection Committee representing multiple stakeholders is required for each source protection region in Ontario, and whereas the Source Protection Committee oversees the source protection program, and the composition ensures that a variety of local interests are represented at the decision-making table. And whereas the City of Ottawa is a member of the Mississippi Rideau Source Protection Committee, and whereas the City of Ottawa has had one member on the Mississippi Rideau SPC since May 2017 and previously had two members since 2007. And whereas the Mississippi Rideau SPC membership undergoes a renewal every 5 years to ensure that it remains in compliance with Ontario Regulation 28807, the regulation that governs source protection committees under Ontario's Clean Water Act. Whereas the City of Ottawa received a letter from the Mississippi Rideau Source Protection Region on November 16, 2023, requesting the city submit the name of the council-appointed member to the SPC before March 22nd, 2024. And whereas Michelle Kearney, Senior Project Manager, Infrastructure Planning, Infrastructure and Water Services Department, is the city's current representative and is willing to remain on the Source Protection Committee for another term. Therefore, be resolved that Council approve the selection of Michelle Kearney to sit as the representative for the City of Ottawa on the Mississippi Rideau Source Protection Committee. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Leeper.
Thank you, Mayor. I've got a street rebuild on Ferndale, and we're looking to restore the driveways as they were before. Therefore, be it resolved that Council approve that in respect to the reconstruction of Ferndale Avenue, private approaches be reinstated as they were immediately prior to the reconstruction of this street.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Leeper. Councillor Kavanagh.
Thank you. Whereas in 2022, 22-year-old Masha Amini, oh, sorry, I lost, it's not on the screen anymore. Can you put it back on the screen, please? Thank you. Was killed while in police custody in the Islamic Republic of Iran. And whereas her death, protests against the Iranian government treatment of women broke out across Iran, sparking a campaign to support Jian Azadi, Women, Life, Freedom. And whereas in September 2022, a 16-year-old named Komar Daradavate was killed while participating in the Jian Azadi Women Life Freedom demonstrations. And whereas a resident of Bay Ward has requested 2 trees to be planted to commemorate the lives of Masha and Komar and honor the sacrifices made by Iranians in fighting for freedom and women's rights. Therefore, be it resolved that that to commemorate the lives and sacrifice of these 2 young activists, the City of Ottawa approves the installation of 2 trees to be planted in Britannia Park with plaques that read the following. 1 plaque in memory of Gina Amini. I won't read the whole date of birth. A Kurdish woman killed by Iran's moral police in Tehran. And the second in memory of Komar Darod Afted, killed by Iran's IRGC during the Jihad Azadi revolution. Be it further resolved that all costs related to the tree and plaque will be covered by the requester.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanaugh. Motion to introduce bylaws. Councillor Hill.
Que le règlement énuméré à l'ordre du jour sous le titre Motion portant présentation de règlement 3 lectures soit lu et adopté.
Merci. Is that carried? Confirmation bylaw, Councillor Hill.
Règlement de ratification.
Que le règlement suivant soit lu et adopté, un règlement ratifiant les délibérations du Conseil du 21 février 2020.
Is that carried? Any inquiries? Motion to adjourn.
Demande de renseignement. Levée de séance.
Le Conseil du 21 février 2024 soit ajourné.
Is that carried? Thank you, everyone. Merci beaucoup.
Good afternoon. Bonjour à tous. My name is Kendra Titley and I will be your moderator. Je m'appelle Kendra Titley et je serai l'animatrice de ce point de presse. I will
be your moderator today.
Their questions. You may ask 1 question with a follow-up. Par ordre alphabétique, j'invite maintenant chaque
I will
organisme.
invite each organization to ask their questions in alphabetical order. You can ask 1 question and 1 follow-up.
And if you're in council chambers, which you are, please ask your question at the microphone. Lorsque vous posez vos questions, veuillez indiquer à qui s'adresse.
Please let us know who your question is for. And if you are in this room, please come up to the mics to ask your questions.
Very much. So my first question is for Madame Amilcar. We've been seeing a lot of work being done, obviously, on phase 2, a lot of trains out and training and that kind of thing. At this point, is it possible to know whether April is still a viable time for the opening of phase 2?
Thank you for the question. First, next Thursday, we'll have a subcommittee LRT. Please join us. We'll have very good news to share. Stay tuned.
Okay, so at this point, we can't say. Sorry, I just want to be clear.
I have always said that for the Trillium line, that should be this spring, so I'm still there.
Okay, thank you very much. And for the mayor, just because we got this announcement today that's very exciting for the city with lacrosse, I was wondering if you had any reaction for what it means for the city.
I'm really excited to hear this news, and I think it's great for our city. We have seen growing interest in sports in our city, and the addition of the women's hockey team this year has been amazing. When you see the number of people who are going to those games and the level of engagement in the community, it's really remarkable. I know the National Lacrosse League has been very successful recently, and for Ottawa to have a team in this league, I think is a big step forward for our community. It's going to be great for young fans and players and for families who are looking for things to do with their kids. So I'm really excited to see this development.
Could you also answer in French? Apologies.
Oui. Alors, je suis très ravi de...
Yes, I'm so happy to know that there will be another team here in Ottawa. We've already seen a lot of new teams in Ottawa, such as the women's hockey team. This is something that will be very beneficial to families and all Ottawa residents. I'm thrilled to be able to go watch a lacrosse match soon.
We'll now go to Arthur White-Crummey at CBC Radio.
So my first question will be for the mayor, I know that during the zoning bylaw review, people are taking a look at parking requirements. And as I was talking to councillors and community members, stakeholders that are being consulted, there does seem to be wider support for potentially easing or even getting rid of minimum parking requirements for new development. I'm wondering if you've had a chance to think about your position on that, given that it is likely to come forward as part of the zoning bylaw review.
I'm looking forward to the whole process, which is going to take some time and will involve consultations with the entire community. So I expect there will be a lot of discussion around that. I think we've already started to see that the number of parking spots required per unit has gone down, and the expectations and demands of developers have gone down around that. So I think there's room to have that conversation, but I'm looking forward to seeing what members of the community will say about it.
And I was also, interested in talking about the convoy protest that just happened, because we've heard that there weren't any tickets actually issued during that, despite the fact that there were, a lot of noise, even fireworks and things like that. So I'm wondering, both to, Mr. Ayotte and to the mayor, can you just respond to the perceived double standard that some residents saw, given that there have been recent protests, notably the Palestine protests, that have received noise tickets?
I'll be very clear, there is no double standard. We're issuing tickets for violations unless there's an officer safety action identified. During the convoy of this week, we have several investigations ongoing with regards to the use of fireworks and noise-producing devices. However, at this point in time, no tickets had been issued, as it was identified that there was an officer safety issue during the convoy protest.
And, just for the mayor as well, if you want to respond to some of the councillor concerns that were issued on social media about that.
The decisions about whether to issue tickets or not are in the hands of bylaw. We don't direct bylaw. We put the policies in place that they follow. I think it's worth noting as well, and maybe Kim can speak to this, but there is a difference between a demonstration that's taking place on a city street and one that's taking place on Parliament Hill. So there are distinctions, and I understand and respect the perception that may exist, but I think we have to look at all of the information and understand everything that's happening before we rush to judgment on these kinds of things.
Thank you. This concludes today's media availability. Ceci conclut le point de presse d'aujourd'hui.
This concludes today's media availability.